Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I wanted to tell you about a book from the author, Strangelands. Strangelands is a collection of 10 stories featuring old legends told in a modern world. It's from Kyle Harrison, the author of tonight's story, and the link for it is in the description down below. Okay guys, on to tonight's story. I've traveled the world as a professional photographer, working with National Geographic, Life magazine, the like. You've probably seen my pictures, but you'd never recognize my name, not that it matters anyway. Much like a famous author, my work defines me more than anything else. One of my favorite places to capture is Africa. The rich variety of wildlife, the untamed jungles, so many different aspects of the continent to truly appreciate. But nothing fascinates me more than the tribes that live in the cradle of mankind, the ones that choose to be cut off from modern civilization. And to me, finding and learning their culture is like taking a glimpse into our past as a species. This is where our very way of life was born. So, what lessons can such practical and simple people teach us? There are, however, very few of these still left that are untainted by the modern world. Either war or explorers have brought the world to them, changed their way for better, or for worse. I feel that such is an inevitable outcome. But still, I hunger to find such a place that nobody has ever come across it before. To be the first to make contact with men and women who do not know about the world beyond. I got my wish last spring. A colleague of mine, Samuel Waterton, he informed me of an expedition to an uncharted Congo. They were going deeper than anyone has ever attempted to before, he told me. I knew that the lush rainforest and the tropical climate was often too much for rugged adventurers to trek through, but the prep and the team he hired sounded like they could handle the long journey. We were ready to go in a few days, with supplies to last at least a month, maybe two, if we rationed properly. Stepping onto the plane and traveling to the heart of creation has always been a thrilling experience, but for some reason this time my spirits were soaring. We landed in Mozambique about 6 hours later, and that same enthusiasm hadn't left me. See, I knew it would be another day's journey to even reach the outskirts of the Republic, so I spent most of the time resting up and familiarizing myself with Waterton's crew. There were a total of 12 of us altogether, but the only ones that really caught my attention were the other photographers, a woman from London named Jamie and an Aussie, Clark. Both of them seemed eager to hear what an old-timer like me could share, so for most of the journey I regaled them with tales from around the globe. "How long you been doing this, mate?" Clark asked as we approached a security checkpoint. Before I got a chance to answer, I saw members of the Congo militia swarm the side of our caravan, forcing Waterton to stop. Without hesitation, I hid my camera under one of the old crates and obeyed the soldiers' every command. Clark and Jamie were terrified. They stood paralyzed as the men took their commodities, shouted orders to Waterton. Our head guide, Ben, translated what they were asking for and provided the clearance papers, which gave us passage to the Congo. For a few tense moments, it was unclear if we were going to be able to travel any further, but after a few dollars passed between our hands, the militia were treating us like we were old friends and waving to us down the road. Once we were out of sight, I retrieved my camera from its hiding spot, and Clark whistled in shock. "How do you know they wouldn't look?" I answered the previous question. "I've been doing this for a long-ass time," I chuckled. I could tell from their expressions they weren't too happy that I was now the only one with a working camera, so I offered a compromise. "We can share the shots I take, and I'll only ask for 20% of the cut," I told them. That seemed to satisfy all of them, but Clark still thought it would be a good idea to shop for a new camera in Lubumbashi. I have only been to the city a few times before this, and it never struck me as being a thriving metropolis, but that was over 6 years ago, and I was ready for it to prove me wrong. Waterton gave us 2 hours before we departed into the Congo itself, so I offered to join Clark on a shopping spree. "So how many of these places do you think will take Australian currency?" he asked as we flagged down a rickshaw and rode through the busy streets. "Probably none of them, my friend. The system here is often one of barter and trade. What can you give them for whatever you want?" I commented as we hopped off a near stretch of shops on the west side of the city. Most of the places didn't have what he was looking for, and others didn't speak a lick of English. Eventually, we found ourselves in a secluded, out-of-the-way antique store, and Clark found a model he was familiar with on display. "X are a beautiful thing. Haven't seen this craftsmanship in years. Give me, sir. How much? He asked the owner. The frail man stopped from dusting his other wares and looked towards us with a toothless smile, hobbling over to get a better look at the item Clark was interested in. You have a good eye. For you, I say 400 pounds, the old man responded. That's a pretty good steal, Clark admitted as he offered the coins to the owner, and the old man's eyes turned to me. And what for you? What do you seek? He asked. Well, just browsing. I already have the best money can buy, I said, putting my own camera softly in my satchel. But not all things can be bought with riches, and their beauty is found within, the owner replied. He guided us to the back shelves of his establishment where more oddities were on display, these older and likely forgotten by the passage of time. The one that stood out for Clark and I the most was an antique camera, a model that hadn't seen the light of day since before our grandfathers were born. Now, despite its age, it was clear that the old man had taken proper care of the piece. The lenses were clean, the bulb unbroken. Even the cowl only showed a soft layer of dust upon it. This item's the jewel of my collection. Paid a king's ransom for it, he said proudly. It was clear that he thought we might be interested, so I entertained the notion of purchasing it from him and asked him, how much is it worth? Oh, priceless. Priceless. Not something which can be simply bought. Clark shot me a knowing look and commented, All right, mate. Then what can we trade? The shop owner leaned towards us, smiling widely as he answered, Only what you can't afford to lose. The two of us did our best not to chuckle, knowing that the old man likely believed the camera possessed mystical powers. Perhaps another time, then, I suggested, trying my best to be polite as we moved back towards the front of the store. I look forward to it, the owner remarked, confident that we would return. Back on the streets of Lubumbashi, Clark shook his head in amazement at our own new equipment. You have to admit one thing. That old-timer knows how to make a living, he said, as we rejoined the caravan. Yeah, it took you too long enough. I was just about to leave without you, Ben said as we hopped aboard. Got sidetracked? Jamie asked. Taking in the local culture, I told them as we settled down for the next leg of our journey. From here on out, civilization would be scarce, and after a day's journey by car, we would be trekking into the jungle by foot. The others in our group seemed nervous at the prospect. To be cut off from technology or aid for so long was something that most of them had likely never done before. I, on the other hand, turned to my trusted journal, a memoir I've kept for years for each experience. I hope this would become as unforgettable as all the others before it. After leaving our caravan at the last safe refuge, Waterton and his men led us northeast through mountainous thickets and deep valleys, and the days began to blur together. Stars guided us by night, and the scorching sun by day. Somehow Ben seemed to know which way to go, although some in our group were already beginning to show signs of fatigue. We gathered water in streams, drinking it sparingly as we pushed through the jungle. These were paths that had never been forged by men, I reminded myself, as I wiped sweat from my brow and cautiously followed every step of the way. Sleep was far and few between, thanks to the wildlife. Waterton had made it clear from the get-go that the territory was swarming with wildcats, venomous snakes, and deadly insects. 2 of our crew did not make it all the way to the heart of the Congo, and their untimely deaths only reminded the rest of us that Eden was not a paradise any longer. Finally, when we thought we could push no farther, a gentle noise like that of drums emerged from the brush. I remember seeing how elated Jamie and Clark were, but I was wary. People in such remote parts are often cautious of outsiders, viewing any and all that come to their land as a threat. It wasn't long before I found that I had a good reason to be concerned. 3 men emerged from the jungle wearing bones as necklaces and traditional tribal gear, their tattooed bodies a testament to the many battles. With their long knives and piles, the natives shouted in what sounded like Swahili, and though I could not understand them, I knew immediately what their questions were. Who were we, and why we'd come here? Ben stepped forward, slowly articulating to the best of his ability in a Nigerian tongue our intentions. Then Waterton gestured for one of his men to bring the trunk that we had hauled out here. We bring gifts, Samuel said, opening to show a variety of different knickknacks that the outside of these rural parts would likely have little to no value at all. The tribal men examined the trunk, trying to figure out what each of the items did, and then shouted orders to each other and to Ben. They say that we're welcome in their village, but any weapons or magic that we have must be left here, he explained. The security detail Waterton hired didn't seem pleased with the prospect of leaving their weapons behind, especially after all they had lost on the journey here, but their boss insisted it was the only way we could be given safe passage. I kept my satchel close to my body, protecting my camera, and wondering if the village would view it as some sort of magic. I didn't have to wonder for long. As we were guided to the small, secluded village, I found myself desperate to capture each and every aspect of their culture, and asked Waterton would I have permission to do so. Ben translated the question to the man that was guiding us to the flattened earth, which seemed to serve as the village circle, but apparently he had asked it wrong because the man did not seem to understand. He says that you can't use your magic here because they are frightened of what the box can do, Ben said, gesturing towards me and Clark's camera. I huffed in frustration as the others of the close-knit community came out and got a look at us. It was infuriating to think that I had come so far only to be gawked at like a prize at a festival. And surely we could teach them that there's no reason to be afraid. We came here to make history, didn't we? I asked insistently as Waterton met with the tribal chief. They conversed for a few minutes in a tongue that I hardly understood, and when they were done, Ben explained, they fear the power of it. They think that it will capture their souls or something. I could prove it's harmless, I insisted, taking out my camera and adjusting it to the light. I can show you that it's merely just a tool. But these people could not see reason. In a matter of seconds, two of the tribal men had me pushed down to the trodden earth. One grabbed a hold of my throat while the other ripped the camera from my neck. I watched in stunned silence as they angrily smashed it against a rock, shouting vulgar languages to all of us. They pinned me down like a wild animal. I shouted in dismay as I struggled to fight back, Waterton's men doing nothing to stop this as I kicked and scratched at the natives, and finally I broke free from their grasp and scrambled over to my team. But I did not come away unscathed. There, amidst the dirt, were the scattered remnants of likely a dozen expeditions, treated now like garbage. These men are savages, I said, spitting into the dirt as Waterton struggled to amend the discord with the chief. The natives began to chant and shout wildly, angry at us for disturbing their sacred ground, and Ben said anxiously, I think it would be better if we left for the time being. I clenched my fists in frustration as our group made their way back towards the jungle. The guards of the village shouting like untamed animals to frighten us away. Once a safe distance, Waterton was a raging volcano. He wagged a finger in my face and shouted at the top of his lungs, Do you see what you've done? It took me 6 months to find this place. 6 months! And your impatience squandered all the discoveries we could have made. We needed time to earn their trust, he snarled. But I wasn't listening. My anger towards their simple superstitions was clouding my judgment. All I could think of was how badly I wished I could teach them a lesson. What do we do now? Jamie asked as we found our other discarded equipment. We need to return to Lumbabasi. With luck, we could try to find locals who know the area and these people, and maybe someone's traded with them in the past, Samuel offered. But that could take weeks. We were supposed to be back in London by spring, Clark remarked angrily. But I could tell his frustration was towards me. We will extend your stay as long as necessary, but there is no point in returning to the village now. I mean, they were welcoming to us once. With time and patience, they will be again, Samuel said, glaring at me as we started the long trek back. I said nothing. The eyes and opinions of my colleagues only caused my own agitation to build. By the time we had made it back to the edge of the Congo, irritation had shifted to thoughts of revenge. All that time was wasted, Ben muttered, as he had to make arrangements to return to the States. One by one, the other members of our caravan also seemed to lose faith that our expedition would never be reattempted. But I wasn't about to let something like this push aside a dream that I've had since I was a boy. As the others packed up their gear, I found my way back to the hidden shop. It was far easier to locate the second time around. The jingle of the shop's bell echoed with a purpose as I entered the cramped store, searching for the owner. "I knew you would return," his voice said from the back of the store. I followed the sound to where he was stooped over, carefully arranging figurines. They reminded me of soldiers, for some reason. "I came to buy the camera you said is not for sale," I informed him. He paused in his task and stood up, a knowing look on his face. "I told you before, no money can buy that. Have you come to give up something else?" he questioned. "I don't care if you want me to sign away my soul. I want it," I fumed. He bowed his head and hobbled over toward the shelf where the camera has been on display. "Well, since it means so much for you, take it. Use it freely," he said, offering the device to me. It felt very heavy in my hands. I smiled at the camera and said, "I'll return it the moment I'm finished." The old man said nothing. Not even a goodbye. And I ran out towards the street, eager to find a way to return to the jungle again. Drops of rain began to fall as I moved back to where the others were gathering to return to Mozambique via the train. I covered the camera in my satchel and looked at all of them in disgust. "We can't simply give up now," I insisted, as the storm started to boom across the sky. "Give it up. We need to turn back now while we still have a chance," Jamie insisted. "Waterton's already left. There's nothing for us now," Clark answered. I clutched the satchel and flared at them for their obstinate attitude. "How long does it take to get back to the village? A day? Maybe 2? I asked. Clark paused at the ticket counter and scrutinized me. "What's gotten into you? Sound like you got something under your sleeve," he commented. "Give me time to go back and get the shots we came across the world for. I can do it. But I'll need to travel alone. Otherwise, the villagers will get spooked," I told them. Now I caught Jasmine's interest as well. "Maybe we should let it go. You can get hurt, or worse. I'll be fine. And we could split the profits when I return. 3 ways. Just give me a little time," I told them both. The storm got worse as they considered my offer, and Jamie nodded reluctantly. "Fine. You've got 2 days. If you take any longer, we're pulling out," she responded. I promised I would take only 1. Finding a guide would be simple. There was never a short supply of locals that needed money. The one I hired spoke Bantu, told me of his rural work as a fisherman, and even spoke of river monsters that had attacked his relatives. These were stories I heard before, so I let my mind drift. Before I knew it, we were on foot. The guide knew of the uncharted lands, but the village I spoke of was a mystery to him. Thankfully, much of the brush was still disturbed, the recent rain making the downtrodden paths easier to find. As we got closer, my guide grew afraid. He was sure this place was unsafe. "Fine, stay here. I will go alone," I said indignantly as I pushed through the brush. He was shaking his head as I took out the camera, eager to finally make these uncivilized people see the errors of their ways. I could see the edge of the village, people performing different tasks the way any community would. I saw that chief, and I knew that he'd be the first subject. I took out the camera and set everything in place. In the brush I was covered, but I knew that I would need to act fast. Covering my face and protecting the camera, I aimed the lens towards the chief. My skin still irritated with the scratches he had inflicted. I didn't hesitate to let the camera capture him, so that I could prove his foolish behavior was a relic of a bygone age. As soon as the bright flash hit him, the other villagers recoiled in confusion, frightened by what had just happened. The camera had far more range than the other had, but perhaps the strangest of all was that the chief was now standing still, as if frozen. His tribal men gathered around him, examining his body. At first I thought it was a trick, and they had known my presence all along. Then, as they became more agitated, I realized it was not. The camera had done something to him. Frightened, I covered it in my satchel and waited to see what happened. The other villagers could make him move, and they watched in shock as the color faded from his face, and then they looked towards the source of the flash. Towards me. They grabbed their weapons, and I panicked. I took multiple shots with the cameras as they rushed towards me, and before my eyes, the villagers were frozen in place. The others thought twice as I stood up and held the camera in my hands, and suddenly I felt imbued with power. They stepped away from me, chanting as they hid in their homes, and I raised my lens up again, grabbing as many pictures of their secluded life as I saw fit. Soon I was in a village that could have been made of stone. I stepped towards the borders, satisfied with all that I had taken and prepared to leave. My guide was there, staring at me with frightened eyes. "What have you done?" he asked, as he looked towards the village. "They're part of history now. And you will be too, if you don't get out of my way," I said. I didn't have time for his opinions on what I did. My colleagues, and the fame that I would achieve for such a discovery, were waiting. My guide refused to offer me passage back to Lubumbashi, but I didn't care. I sold and I bartered with passing caravans and tribal men to make it back. Some feared me, and they made me feel as though the experience in the village had somehow changed me. I did not know the truth until I had returned to civilization. These people gave me a wide berth, mumbling obscene words as I pushed through the crowd. And when I found Jasmine and Clark, they hardly recognized me. "What happened to you?" Clark asked. "I haven't changed," I said in confusion. Jamie offered me a small hand mirror that she kept in her purse. Seeing my face made me feel like I was staring at a stranger. It looked like an infection had stricken the left side of my cheek. Coarse veins ran through my flushed features. It looked like I was dying. My eyes were hardly filled with color. And then I remembered the tribal men. How their features faded after I took their picture. "What happened out there? What did you do?" I stumbled away from them in shock and aghast at the affliction I was stricken with. I ran through the streets of the twisting town, trying to find the hidden shop. I didn't know if it was because of my panic or because of the magic that was now poisoning my blood, but I couldn't find it. It was nearly dusk when I returned to my friends, although neither of them wanted to be close to me. "These pictures are crap," Clark said as he examined the camera. I grabbed the camera from him to see for myself. My eyes widened as I checked each and every shot I had taken. Each of them showed nothing but shadowy blurs. The images I had masterfully captured of that hidden tribe, they now looked like distorted and warped nightmares. No, this can't be," I stuttered. I had it all, the whole village." Clark examined the camera a bit further. His eyes widened as he recognized it. "You bought this from the antique shop, didn't you?" "Holy shit, you got swindled," he laughed. But soon as his amusement turned to frustration, We waited days for you. I promised my wife that we'd be home for the holidays. Now I'm going home with nothing," he said. I snatched the camera away before he dropped it. My body coursing with pain as I realized the dark magic this camera had was now affecting me. "I can prove it. This camera, it does something to anyone who's captured in its lens. See, the superstitions are true," I told them. "What a load of bollocks," Jamie muttered. "Come to the village. One final time, you'll see what became of them," I insisted. "Are you crazy? We have no way of getting there now, and no time to be wasting to do so," she snarled at me. "A camera that steals people's souls. Honestly, I think that jungle heat is but boiling your brain," Clark said, as he stood up and grabbed his gear. "I have no part of this." Jamie agreed with the sentiment, and I soon found myself alone, confused, and frightened by the camera I now held. What had I done? Was there a way to reverse it? I carefully placed the camera back into my satchel and I started towards the edge of town. There was nothing in civilized life for me to return to now. The people here already treated me like a leper, and I could feel my body already falling apart. My only focus now was to unravel this dark, mystic power that I had unlocked. I traveled with fewer supplies than ever before, trekking through the mud and dangerous terrain that was swarming with predators. Yet even they seemed to steer clear of me as I settled my head at night. And was I cursed? The stars themselves didn't seem to shine as bright as I pushed through, desperate to find the village, to make things right. My own pride and foolishness had caused this to happen. I knew. My own misconceptions of what the soul even was. I had disregarded their culture, and I was paying the price. This all came to a head when I found the rugged path that took me towards their hidden community. Yet when the final thick jungle gave way, I found myself staring at nothing. The village, its people, even the animals, they were simply gone, vanished from the earth, trapped inside the camera I now held, warped to become mindless apparitions that would never again be free. I was exhausted from the heat, dying of thirst. My strength to even go another step had left my body. I fumbled with the camera and I considered smashing into pieces on the rocks around me, but instead I focused the lens on myself and saw the deathly visage which was now my own reflection. Most of my face was eaten away. I looked like a walking corpse, perhaps that's what I am. Cursed for my vanity. If that is so, then I can only think of one punishment to fit my crimes. I adjusted the camera and peered into the lens. As I prepared to take my own picture, I wonder if a man as heartless as me even has a soul. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and I just want to tell you thank you so much for watching, or listening to, or however you happen to get it, tonight's story. If you take a look in the description down below, you're going to find the link back to the author of tonight's story on Reddit, or on creepypasta.com, or their respective website. We don't just get stories from one particular place, we get them from all over, which means that if you have a story you want me to read, you can always send it over to me at mrcreepypasta@gmail.com. And especially if you have a book that you want to be able to promote to go along with that, send me over a link to that as well, because I'm always down to help promote authors and their books, like you'll see at the beginning of some of the videos. And a very special thank you to everybody on that Patreon, patreon.com/mrcreepypasta, especially Ariel Torres, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, Asia, G. Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, Nico, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Don Meulmeester, Eliminator86, SteampunkSinner, Kaleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Gabrielle Undefined, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Bobby Jean Torgan, Dr. Strawberry, The Wormhole, Barbara Macedo, and Vic. Thank you guys so much, and if anyone would like to join them on that list, head over to patreon.com/mrcreepypasta. Here's hoping that you guys are loving the horror as much as I am. And sweet dreams.